after we have our fossil side chat, we'll have time for audience Q&A too. So think of a couple good questions that you have for Mike and for Kirk coming up. But for both of you, we'll kick off. So, when asked where his passion for the natural world began, Sir David describes his childhood in Leicester collecting fossils, as we saw in the film. Where and how did your own love for nature begin, and what have been some key experiences since then that have made you feel like you were a kid again, or otherwise feel that same wonder and curiosity? Kirk, you want to start us off?
Mine's actually sort of eerily the same as David Attenborough's, because my grandfather was born in Salisbury, England, and when I was 13 in 1973, my mom took me back to there. We went down to Lyme Regis on the Dorset coast, where this giant landslide is pushing out shale every year, and there are beautiful golden ammonites on the beach. That's where I found my first ammonite. And years later, when I met David Attenborough, I told him about that, and he was finding ammonites near Leicester, where he was growing up as a kid. So it's like the same fossil actually got us started. And the fact that I was on that beach 3 years before he started filming Life on Earth, so he was only 47 years old then. So just a testament, like I can remember that clearly as an adult, and now I'm seeing the full arc of his life. And the thing that really stood out to me in that show was that number, 500 million people in 1979, when the world population was 4.3 billion, which means that that show has reached 11% of the world's population. That's remarkable. I mean, that's never going to happen again. I mean, the population is now doubled from that time, and the media market is fractionalized and atomized. So it's a good show that gets 2 million viewers now. 500. Do you even believe that number?
Well, you also got to remember that back then, how many people actually had a television? So of that 4 billion people, maybe only half of those people. So it's probably more like 25% of the people who could watch it.
It's amazing.
I suppose mine's the same as school. It's school, like, I think David often says this, every child is a lover of natural history, and I think I was as a kid. You know, you had a great biology teacher, encouraged us to not just learn in the classroom, but go out and learn in the gardens of the school and all the rest of it. But I think really it's, you know, it is his shows. I mean, I remember watching Life on Earth as a teenager thinking, that looks like fun. I didn't think I wanted to be him, but I wanted to do what he did. And I think that was what drove me to do the job I have, but also that whole Life on Earth, as they were describing there, it did grip the country in a way that was kind of unprecedented. It was like as if there was a window in the house and somebody had got a cloth and cleaned the window and suddenly you could see out and see the most extraordinary thing. It was amazing. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I know Life on Earth inspired so many people in their careers. And I'd be really curious to also hear, in addition to Life on Earth, what other Sir David documentary has inspired you the most in your career, and why?
You know, for me, it has to be the Life on Earth, because that was like the boom drop. You get to see the whole thing. But my favorite actually one is the one I think that you worked on, Mike, David Attenborough and the Sea Monster, which is about the collecting of a pliosaur skull off a cliff off the coast of Dorset. When it's, you know, David's quite old at this point in time, and he's out there wedging a sledgehammer, cracking rocks on the beach. And this guy, Chris Moore, who's a commercial fossil collector in the town that's east of Lyme Regis, had found a skull of this giant pliosaur sticking out halfway up this sea cliff, and it's like a 6-foot long skull. And somehow David is involved. Chris was not a nimble young man either, and a couple of their old friends engineered somehow to get this 6-foot long rock skull off the middle of a cliff. And the whole show is like the thing's gonna fall off and crash and smash to smithereens. But somehow it didn't. They got this hull at the top of the hill. And you know, that was, for me, just pure candy, because I mean, I love fossils, and watching old guys do a successful salvage job was amazing. So it's not your typical David Attenborough moment, but for me, it's like perfect.
I think that's a good show. I think I'm going to say one of the ones I've done myself with him. Obviously, it's not to be, and it's always, when people ask me, I always say it's the last one because that is the one most recently. And and it was on PBS, which is The Green Planet, because thank you. Partly because everybody said you'll never be able to make it. Nobody's ever going to watch a show about plants. Nobody's ever going to enjoy that. And to prove them wrong and to do something that made people see the world differently and experience the world differently. And I would not have been able to pull that off without David, because he was the sort of in the Lord of the Rings kind of way. He was the guardian who took you into the portal that you have to go through, this time jumping portal to understand plants, because you have to then you have to think and you have to see the world in tree time in this completely different time frame. And David was the person who took you by the hand and led you through it. And also he really, really enjoyed it, because he was 92 or 93 when we did that sequence. I mean, the little sequence with the cucumber there, that was one of the sequences. We actually did that in the UK. And you can see the fun he was having when he did that. When I give talks, I often show that clip because it's very nice and short, but also it shows the fun he has when he's with nature. Okay, it's a plant, but the fact that cucumber does that most ridiculous explosion, and he knew it was coming, but he didn't know quite when it was coming. But so I absolutely love that sequence. And the other thing was that he enjoyed that series partly because before then he'd had done the classic Life on Earth, which we kind of remade basically for the last 40 years, is him going somewhere. We do a lot of filming. He walks onto stage, so to speak, and everybody goes, "What's he going to do? What's this trick he's going to pull off?" And I always used to love that. And as he got older, we did less and less of that. But when we did The Green Planet, we said, right, this is our chance to go back and do that. And I remember we were at his house, and his daughter now lives with him and kind of looks after him, manages him, and he's in fear of her. And she's very protective, rightly. And he has to say, he was in his 90s, and we were talking about the number of days we were going to go. I wanted to take him to Costa Rica, around the world, to quite a lot of places around the world. And we would say, well, we could probably do maybe 2 weeks away, and that'll be about 5 sequences, maybe 3 weeks. But I'd really like to do 4 or 5. And Susan would say, no, I think 3. And then she said, right, I'm just anybody in coffee? And she looked out to the kitchen and said, we'll do 5. And sure enough, we did.
Thank you for sharing that. It's a lovely story. And I think you noted some of those behind-the-scenes moments, and as we saw in the film, we had the pleasure of hearing from different crew members about the behind-the-scenes action about creating life on Earth, noting Sir David's humor, his ambition to capture moments never seen on film, and a lot of his drive. It'd be great to hear from both of you about some of those memorable behind-the-scenes moments of working and collaborating with Sir David. Perhaps Kirk, we'll start with you.
Well, I've had 2 long days. I've never worked with him per se, but he's been here twice since I became the director. And the first time was his 90th birthday, actually, 10 years ago, when we went out for dinner in Georgetown and had a great time. And one of the great joys about being the director of this museum is I have this thing called the number 1 key, which opens all of the doors. And I'm the chief curator of this museum, and we have 148 million specimens. It's the world's largest collection. And I'm like, David, I have the number 1 key, so off we went. And for me, it was a chance to see if I could stop him, because I knew he loved fossils. I had to show him things that would delight him and surprise him. And I showed him 2 things which were direct hits. One was there's a place along the coast of Oregon and Washington where there are little round rocks. And you hit them just right, they crack open. And instead of an ammonite, they have perfect crabs in them. All the little arms, the legs, the claws in perfect life positions. These crabs had sort of burrowed in and then became fossils in the burrow, so they're 100% complete. And they still have the color on their shells, the orange patterns learned. And I showed him one of those, and he was delighted with that one. And then I took him, because I knew we had one fossil that, the second time he came here, we interviewed him on stage in Baird Auditorium, and that was a great honor and a lot of fun. But I knew that in the exhibit, he and I walked through the exhibit quite detailed. He was very interested in every single fossil. I knew there was one fossil he probably had never heard of, which is this thing, which is one of our very odd things. We have the only 2 skulls known. It's an animal from Peru that's 15 million years old, and it's a fossil whale, but it has 2 tusks. Narwhals have 1 tusk. This one has 2, and they point backwards. One is a long tusk, the size of a broom handle. The other one's about 2 feet long. So it's got different length tusks, and they're both retroflexed. And we call it the walrus whale. It's a whale that has become similar to a walrus in its morphology and its behavior. And I was like, I spent the whole time like queuing it up to get him to the walrus whale, where I could ask him, what do you think this is? And I got him. It was great. It's like, oh my God.
I mean, showing David Attenborough fossils in a room like that, have you checked his pockets afterwards?
I was warned. I was definitely warned.
Once a collector, always a collector. Any means possible. Well, a colleague, when I started working on trials, let me just rewind. So, saw life on Earth as a teenager, thought I want to do this one day. And I had heard, I was in my 20s, I was working for the BBC, and I had heard that he was going to do his last series, which is going to be The Trials of Life. And I thought, this is my chance, I've got to work on this, otherwise I'm never getting the chance. And by a long circuitous route, I actually managed to end up working on The Trials of Life, which was a phenomenal thing. I was what they call an observational documentary filmmaker before then. I thought I'd do 3 years with David Attenborough doing Trials of Life, go back to that. After 3 years of Trials of Life, why would you ever do anything else? And by the way, that's why they call animals. I still have PTSD about that, because I love that line from Turner Television. But anyway, they didn't know. Sold the videos, and that's why we're in business. Anyway. On that series, Trials of Life, there's a young guy and I, we were in our 20s, we were very competitive in a nice way about trying to do more and more outrageous things with Attenborough. And the thing about him is he was always, as long as it wasn't stupid, as long as it was going to be something that showed something really interesting, David was kind of up for anything. And this was I come back and say, look, I'm going to do this, and Alice would come and go, oh yeah. Then he'd go off and then he'd do something, and then I'd watch it, like, damn, it's even better. And it just was getting worse and worse and worse, and we were going to kill him. We were getting more and more crazy with the things we did. It's got to stop. But just before it did stop, this is the closest I came to killing. Nigeria. I was doing the program called Homemaking, and the ultimate home in the natural world, we believed, was the termite mound. And the ultimate termite mound is a termite called Microtermes bellicosus. It produces massive mounds about 14, 15 feet high. And underneath it, to cool the colony, the termites excavate a huge chamber, and they build this remarkable air conditioning system, these concentric rings. We thought, David agreed, this would be an extraordinary thing to demonstrate. The only way to do that, though, was for him to crawl into the termite mound. So we agreed, so we went out there. This was a termite mound that was unfortunately going to be destroyed because the farmers were clearing the land, so it was fine. So we dug a little trench, a tiny little trench about shoulder's width, with David to crawl down into this chamber. We cut another little tiny hole on the other side to put the camera through, and a light, and another little hole that I could just look through to direct him. So stand by. Oh, by the way, those of you that know Latin, Macrotermes, big termite, bellicosus, warlike termite. Now termites do not like people, anything, but they don't like people going inside their termite mounds. They have these big soldiers with big jaws and big stings. Action! David crawls into this thing, crawling. We can't see anything other than just, we can hear him. I'm looking through this little thing. On the headphones we can hear and the termites are attacking the microphone and biting the microphone. Anyway, I can just see him, and he crawls into just about half into shot. His hair's all over the place, his shirts, and he does his best to deliver this piece to camera about the air conditioning system. At which point he starts to go, ah, and the camera, of course, thinks there's a drum and can see his legs twitching, so grabs his legs and pulls him out. David comes out, Harold, his shirt's all ripped, covered in mud. Unfortunately, he hadn't crawled far enough into the shot, so we couldn't see him. And also the sound was ripped by the termites. So he said, okay. I said, sorry, David, we didn't get that. We've got to do take 2. So he said, okay. I'll get another shirt. So he gets another shirt, nice clean one. Starts again. Action, crawls in. The termites have got the message. This is David Attenborough. Not a single one came near him. Crawls perfectly into shot. Delivers this quite long 2-minute piece of camera about the wonders of the termite mud. And it's the only time in my life I've ever said, cut. I thought, thank the Lord.
Wow, how do you even follow that up?
Watch Trials of Life, episode 5, the last sequence, and remember, what you see was not what will happen the first time.
Well, and for those of you, if you haven't seen the full-length feature of Life on Earth, Attenborough's Greatest Adventure, definitely check it out. There's also great outtakes. I think one where Sir David is descending down the Grand Canyon on a donkey and does not realize that he's allergic to the donkey, and then needs to present and film, and his eyes are all puffed up, and it's quite a
wide shot, which we'd never, as a director, you'd never do it in wide shot. You have to do it in wide shot because his eyes are so scrunched up, you can barely see.
Yes, and the film also goes into, I learned a lot about certain scenes that had never been captured on film yet that were featured on Life on Earth. And it really just shows you how innovative and how pioneering it really was at the time. And just looking at the evolution of filmmaking from Life on Earth up until now, a recent BBC article pointed out how much technology in filmmaking has changed during Sir David's lifetime. He is the only person to have won a BAFTA award in the UK in black and white, color, HD, 3D, 4K, and now even VR. So this is a question for Mike. What is the next frontier for creating environmental documentaries? And what in the natural world has not yet been captured on film? And for those that haven't seen Life on Earth, the making of, there's a really great commentary around filming one of the first lion hunts that's ever captured on film. So.
Well, if I told you what the latest technology is, I'd have to kill you, because that's our secret. But technology, and seriously, the technology has been an important part of our relationship with David as filmmakers, because he's always been a real advocate of that. Not just for the sake of technology, but because what the mission is to show people things they can't see with their own eyes. And what the technology does is allows you to do that. So each time a piece of technology appears, or sometimes we invent, it's to solve a problem, to see something that we haven't been able to see before. And one of the things that David often says is, I wrote that in a script, that story in a script 25 years ago, we couldn't film it then. I wrote it in 15 years ago, couldn't do it then, now we can. And so that's a great, when you go to him and say, I've got this technology to do that, it's now we can do it, you feel good about that. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what the next piece of technology is. It's all really about miniaturization now. All the technology we've had historically just gets smaller and smaller and smaller and more remotable. So I mean, one of the things that has really been a breakthrough is being able to remove the physical camera from the physical operator. So you can operate it remotely, which means much less likely to disturb the animals. You can get the cameras closer. You can just go places and see things you couldn't see before. So I'm sure there's somebody clever in Silicon Valley developing something that we'll be using in a few years' time. Drone arrays or something like that. Yeah.